Let's jump right into it. Number 5. Imagine waking up one day and suddenly speaking in a completely different accent, even though you've never left your hometown. This isn't some weird party trick or psychological breakdown. This is foreign accent syndrome, and it's got doctors scratching their heads. Picture this: you're a lifelong Texan who suddenly starts talking like you're from rural Ireland, or a New Yorker who begins speaking in what sounds like a thick Russian accent. The really mind-boggling part is that these people aren't faking it. They genuinely cannot control their new speech patterns. Scientists know it usually happens after brain injuries or strokes, but here's where it gets absolutely bonkers. The accent that emerges often has zero connection to any place the person has ever been or any language they've ever heard regularly. One woman in England started speaking with what sounded like a Chinese accent despite never having any exposure to Chinese languages. Another case involved someone developing what listeners described as a Jamaican accent in rural Minnesota. The brain damage is real, the accent change is real, but the mechanism linking specific injuries to specific accent patterns remains a total mystery. It's like your brain decides to randomly shuffle through the world's linguistic playlist and get stuck on a station you never knew existed. Number 4, what if I told you there are people walking around right now who literally cannot feel physical pain? Sounds like a superpower, right? Wrong. Congenital insensitivity to pain is actually a nightmare scenario that demonstrates just how little we understand about our own nervous systems. These individuals can break bones, burn themselves, or suffer internal injuries without the slightest sensation of discomfort. You'd think this would make scientists jump for joy, finally a way to study pain mechanisms directly, but instead it's revealed how completely clueless we are about pain processing. Here's what makes it truly bizarre. These people often have perfectly normal nervous systems in every other way. They can feel touch, pressure, temperature, and texture just fine. It's specifically pain signals that get lost somewhere between injury and brain perception. The scary part: most people with this condition don't live past 30 because pain isn't just an annoying sensation. It's literally your body's alarm system preventing you from accidentally killing yourself. Children with this condition have been known to chew off their own tongues without realizing it, or break limbs during normal play and continue using them until the damage becomes catastrophic. Scientists can see that certain nerve pathways are affected, but they can't explain why only pain gets filtered out while everything else works normally, or why the specific genetic mutations involved would create such a precise and devastating effect. Number 3, get ready for something that sounds like pure science fiction, but happens to real people every single day. Alien hand syndrome turns your own hand into a rebellious entity that acts completely independent of your conscious control. We're talking about hands that will unbutton your shirt while you're trying to button it, throw objects without permission, or even attempt to strangle their owner. This isn't a muscle spasm or tremor. This is coordinated, purposeful movement that the person absolutely cannot control or stop. The affected hand moves with intention and seems to have its own agenda. Patients report watching in horror as their hand reaches out and slaps someone during a conversation, or grabs food they don't want to eat, or begins writing words they never intended to write. The really unsettling part is that the hand often seems to know exactly what it's doing. It can solve puzzles, manipulate objects with skill, and perform complex tasks, but it does all of this against the conscious will of the person it belongs to. Scientists know it's related to damage in the corpus callosum, the bridge between brain hemispheres, but they cannot explain how this creates what appears to be a separate consciousness controlling motor functions. Some patients have described feeling like they're sharing their body with someone else, which honestly sounds like the most terrifying medical condition imaginable. The hand doesn't just move randomly, it moves with what appears to be purpose and intelligence, as if someone else's mind is occasionally taking control of part of your body. Number 2, picture trying to convince a doctor that you're literally rotting from the inside out, even though every test comes back normal and you appear perfectly healthy to everyone else. Welcome to Morgellons disease, a condition so controversial that half the medical community isn't even sure it exists. Patients describe feeling like insects are crawling under their skin, experiencing painful sores that won't heal, and most bizarrely, finding strange fibers growing out of their skin that don't match any known textile or biological material. These aren't delusions or psychiatric symptoms. People are literally pulling mysterious fibers out of their bodies and bringing them to doctors in jars. When scientists analyze these fibers under microscopes, they find materials that don't correspond to anything in the environment, clothing, or known skin conditions. Some fibers appear to be synthetic, others look organic, and some seem to be a hybrid of materials that shouldn't exist in nature. The CDC spent years investigating Morgellons and essentially threw up their hands, concluding that they couldn't determine what was causing the symptoms or what the fibers actually were. Patients often develop these symptoms in clusters, suggesting some kind of infectious element, but no pathogen has ever been identified. The most unsettling part is that the physical evidence is undeniable. People are finding real, tangible fibers emerging from their skin, but science has absolutely no framework for explaining how or why this could happen. It's like discovering that some people's bodies are manufacturing mystery materials that shouldn't be able to exist, let alone grow out of human tissue. Number 1. Imagine if everything you thought you knew about consciousness and identity could be completely wrong. Codard syndrome, also called walking corpse syndrome, involves people who become absolutely convinced that they are dead, don't exist, or have lost essential body parts or organs, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This isn't depression or low self-esteem. These individuals genuinely believe they have ceased to exist as living beings. They might insist that their brain has been removed, that they're actually corpses that somehow continue to move and speak, or that they died weeks ago and are now experiencing some form of afterlife. The complete disconnect from reality is so profound that some patients stop eating because dead people don't need food, or request to be taken to morgues because that's where they belong. What makes this absolutely mind-bending for scientists is that these patients can still think, reason, and communicate coherently about everything except their own existence. They might discuss complex topics, solve problems, and interact normally with others, while simultaneously maintaining that they're not actually alive to be having these conversations. Brain scans of Codard's patients show unusual activity patterns in areas responsible for self-recognition and emotional processing. But science cannot explain how specific neural changes could create such a complete inversion of self-perception. Some patients even claim to be immortal, reasoning that since they're already dead, they cannot die again. The philosophical implications are staggering. If consciousness can become completely convinced that it doesn't exist while clearly continuing to exist and think, what does that say about the nature of consciousness itself? It's like the human brain has found a way to create a logical paradox that shouldn't be possible, where awareness becomes aware that it's not aware, which is perhaps the most bizarre medical mystery on the planet. That's all for now. I'll make similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.